In June 2025, a young woman named Michaela Raines was found dead at her home in Faribault, Minnesota. She was 30 years old. She had a husband, a 4-year-old daughter, and more than 2.4 million subscribers who watched her videos online because she did something genuinely beautiful with her life. She rescued foxes.
Hi! Hi, Finnegan! You good boy? Were you trying to take me with you, huh? You gonna take me down into your fox den? You happy boy? I love you so much, and you're so cute, and you're the best Finnegan fox ever.
She had founded a nonprofit called Save a Fox back in 2017 when she was just 20 years old, pulling domesticated foxes off fur farms and giving them a second life. 2 of her foxes, Finnegan and Dixie, had gone viral in their own right. One went so viral that the video game Overwatch 2 used the sounds of her foxes in its design. She was as wholesome as the internet gets. She wasn't a controversial figure at all. She wasn't a politician. She wasn't some celebrity caught in a scandal. She was a woman who loved animals and rescued hundreds of them. Her husband, Ethan, announced her death in a YouTube video just a few days later, and he said she had died by suicide.
But a couple days ago, Michaela Raines passed away.
You guys only see what you see from a social media perspective, and I work so much that the time I actually get to spend with my animals is time I spend recording my time with them, which really actually just takes away the moment, because I have to be so focused on recording the moment so that everyone else can see it, so that we can get donations, that I never actually get to have the good moments with them anymore.
And then he said something that sent a shockwave through the internet. He blamed Reddit. For years, he said, a group of people had been targeting Michaela through Reddit snark subreddits that were dedicated entirely to mocking her voice, her appearance, her methods. They spread false claims that she was abusing the very animals she devoted her life to saving. They accused her of harvesting fox fur when she was simply offering jars of naturally shed fur as a fundraiser. They zoomed into her videos frame by frame, looking for evidence of cruelty, and when they didn't find any, they invented it. Michaela had autism, depression, and borderline personality disorder. She felt every single word of it. She pushed through for years anyway, saving hundreds more animals, being a mother, being a wife. And then one day, she couldn't push through it anymore. More than 23,000 people signed a petition demanding Reddit shut down snark communities. But Reddit's official response was clinical. They pointed out the snark subreddit had only 28 members at the time, and they eventually banned it after the petition gained enough media pressure. 28 members, 23,000 people demanding a response. And Reddit's first instinct was to minimize it. Michaela Raines is not the only person this has happened to. She's not even the most extreme case of what Reddit has done to real people. She's just the most recent, the most heartbreaking, and the one that finally made mainstream news.
We're back with the death of a YouTube star with millions of followers. She was just 31. Her story raising new awareness about the dangers of online harassment.
Over the last 2 decades, Reddit has gone from a freewheeling college experiment into one of the most visited websites on the planet, and simultaneously one of the most politically homogeneous, ideologically policed, and demonstratively harmful social media environments ever built. It generated $2.2 billion in revenue in 2025. It has over 121 million daily active users. Its CEO was paid $193 million. And peer-reviewed academic research analyzing more than 600 million comments concluded that the platform published 112 times more left-leaning political content than right-leaning content, yet called it neutral. So how did this happen? How did a website that once called itself the front page of the internet become this? Let's talk about it. Reddit was born on June 23, 2005. 2 University of Virginia roommates, Steve Huffman and Alexis Ohanian, had gone to a lecture in Boston given by Paul Graham, the famous startup investor behind Y Combinator. Graham turned them away at first. The idea they pitched him, a food ordering app, was garbage. But he liked the guys. He told them to build something else, something simpler. He told them to build the front page of the internet. They got $100,000 in seed funding and got to work. The concept was almost comically simple. Aggregate links from around the web, let users vote on them with upvotes and downvotes, and surface the best content to the top. A pure democracy of the internet, at least in theory. They even seeded the early site with fake accounts to make it look less empty. In November 2005, a digital prodigy named Aaron Swartz, a 19-year-old who had already co-authored the RSS Standard and Creative Commons, merged his startup with Reddit and joined the team. Unfortunately, Aaron Swartz's story is one of the most tragic in the history of the internet, and Reddit has largely tried to ignore its complicated relationship with him. Swartz was one of the most gifted computer scientists of his generation. He was also a fierce believer in the free flow of information. The idea that knowledge locked behind paywalls and institutional barriers was a form of institutional theft, and that the internet should be a force for radical openness. He was also massively depressed and deeply troubled, and the US government's decision to pursue a felony case against him for downloading academic papers from the MIT network eventually became too much. Aaron Swartz died by suicide in January of 2013 at the age of 26.
A co-founder of the social, news, and entertainment website Reddit has been found dead. Police say 26-year-old Aaron Swartz killed himself yesterday in his Brooklyn apartment.
And there's something deeply ironic about the fact that the platform he helped build in its earliest days would later become one of the internet's most effective engines of harassment. In October of 2006, just a year after launch, Condé Nast, the publisher of Vogue and Wire, acquired Reddit for somewhere under $20 million. At the time, it seemed like a steal for Condé Nast. Within a few years, it would become clear that they had gotten the deal of a century. Huffman and Ohanian left in 2009, handing the platform over to corporate management. Then in 2008, a quiet, monumental thing happened. Reddit introduced subreddits. Individual communities, each with their own moderators, their own rules, their own culture. It sounds like a minor product update, but it was actually the decision that made Reddit what it is today, for better and for worse. Because subreddits meant that communities could self-segregate entirely. You didn't just join Reddit. You joined r/gaming or r/politics or r/askreddit. You curated your own experience. And the people in charge of each community, they were volunteer moderators, unpaid, anonymous users who applied to run these communities and then wield an enormous power over who got to speak and what could be said. No salary, no oversight, no accountability. And in the early years, Reddit leaned libertarian. The platform was dominated by tech-savvy, male, young users who prided themselves on their commitment to free speech in its most absolute form. The ethos, at least publicly, was that any and all ideas should be allowed to compete. Sunlight was the best disinfectant. The community would vote the garbage down and the truth up. It was naive, and it was wrong, and the evidence of that started accumulating almost immediately. In its earliest years, Reddit hosted some of the darkest corners of the internet without any meaningful intervention. There was r/jailbait, a community dedicated to posting sexualized images of minors. It ran openly on the platform for years before it was finally banned in 2011, and only after CNN's Anderson Cooper ran a segment on it.
Well, tonight you're about to meet one of the biggest trolls on the internet, reviled for his pornographic posts. He's speaking out tonight in his first television interview.
So that's what it took. Not a policy from the company or a moral reckoning. It was national television coverage shaming them into it. And then there was r/creep shots, non-consensual photos of women taken in public, shared for the explicit purpose of objectifying them. There was r/beaten women, became what was known as the fappening. When a massive cache of stolen, private, nude photographs of female celebrities, including Jennifer Lawrence, was leaked online. Reddit did not just host some of it. Entire communities were built around it.
Break in a case involving a massive invasion of privacy for some big stars, including Jennifer Lawrence and Kate Upton. Hackers broke into their accounts, stole nude pictures, and then leaked them onto the internet.
More than 100 of Hollywood's leading ladies' accounts allegedly accessed, photos stolen and leaked onto underground message boards all over the internet Sunday night.
Millions of users consumed stolen intimate images of real people. Reddit eventually took the content down, but only after days of it circulating freely, and only after enormous public pressure, and only after significant legal threats. But the most chilling story from this era is what happened in April of 2013, in the immediate aftermath of the Boston Marathon bombing. A terrorist attack that killed 3 people and injured hundreds more. In the days after the bombing, Reddit users created a subreddit called r/Find Boston Bombers, the explicit goal of which was to crowdsource the identification of the attackers through photos taken at the scene. The motivation was, in a distorted way, understandable. People were terrified and furious, and they wanted justice. What they did instead was weaponize the mob. A college student named Sunil Tripathi had gone missing in March of that year. His family was already living in a nightmare, and then the Reddit mob zeroed in on him. On completely false information, thousands of users became convinced that he was one of the bombers. His name and photo spread across Reddit, across the internet, across a news broadcast, and his family, already desperate and searching for their missing son, was suddenly bombarded with threats, accusations, and targeted harassment from tens of thousands of strangers who were certain they had cracked the case.
This last month has changed our lives forever, and we hope it will change yours too. Take care of one another, lend your hand, be gentle.
He never bombed anything. He was already dead when Reddit decided he was a terrorist. He had died by suicide weeks earlier, and his body was later found in the Providence River. Reddit publicly apologized for what its general manager called a, quote, witch hunt. The people who carried out this harassment were not bad actors who had infiltrated Reddit. They were everyday Reddit users, doing what Reddit's structure encouraged them to do. Pile on together in a shared community, vote each other's confidence up, and build a consensus that became self-reinforcing regardless of whether it had any connection to reality. The machine was working exactly as designed. By 2015, Reddit had grown into one of the most visited websites in the world. It also had a serious public relations problem. The same platform that hosted r/science and r/history and r/personal finance also hosted communities dedicated to fat shaming, race baiting, and raw hatred. The ads weren't selling well, and that's fair. Brands didn't want their products appearing next to what Reddit allowed to fester. Something had to change. Steve Huffman had not come back yet. Reddit's interim CEO at the time was a woman named Ellen Pao, a former venture capital executive who had become famous for a high-profile gender discrimination lawsuit against her former employer, Kleiner Perkins.
One woman is taking on gender discrimination in the workplace with a $16 million lawsuit. Ellen Pao says she was denied a promotion because she couldn't break into the boys' club of the tech world. But her former company says she just didn't deserve it.
Pao brought with her a very different attitude toward moderation. In June 2015, she made a decision that detonated the platform. She banned r/fatpeoplehate, a community with roughly 150,000 members dedicated to mocking and degrading fat people, along with a handful of other harassment-focused communities. The backlash was immediate and enormous. Thousands of subreddits went dark in protest. Reddit's own front page was flooded with attacks on Pao. Petitions circulated calling for her resignation. The memes were vicious. The harassment was personal. The volume was deafening. And within weeks, Ellen Pao was gone. She resigned, citing the impossibility of her position, and later wrote extensively about the organized misogyny she experienced during her time there, which in hindsight is kind of expected given her past. But either way, Reddit declared that her departure was mutual. And then Steve Huffman came back as CEO. The revolt was framed by its participants as a free speech uprising. And there was something real in that. Many users genuinely believed in an open platform, but there was also something more specific going on. For the first time, Reddit had tried to draw a line, and the community had made clear in overwhelming terms that it would not tolerate the people in charge drawing lines that the community itself did not approve. In that dynamic, the mob as a check on corporate authority would define the next decade of Reddit's existence in ways that nobody fully anticipated at the time. Huffman came back and tried to thread a very difficult needle. He needed to clean the platform up enough for advertisers, but he couldn't do it so aggressively that he triggered another revolt. And he kept making mistakes. In November 2016, one of the most bizarre and telling moments in Reddit's corporate history occurred. Huffman, whose username on the site was u/spez, secretly edited comments that users on r/thedonald community had made. The users had been posting comments critical of him, including variations of the phrase, fuck you/spez. So he edited the comments, changing the usernames in them to the names of the subreddit's own moderators, so it looked like the users were insulting their own leaders instead of him. He did it covertly, without any announcement and without any disclosure. He only admitted it afterward when users noticed, calling it, in his words, trolling the trolls. He posted a self-deprecating thread about it and apologized. But that showed that the person in charge of deciding what speech was acceptable on the platform had personally manipulated speech on the platform and laughed it off. The trust that eroded that day would never fully come back. And for years afterward, Reddit users would sign off posts with edit spez as a standing protest. It became a part of the language on the platform. To understand what Reddit became politically, you have to understand the mechanics. It wasn't a conspiracy. Nobody sat in a room and decided to make Reddit a left-wing echo chamber. It emerged systematically, structurally, inevitably from the design of the platform itself. Starting with the voting system. Every post, every comment gets upvoted or downvoted by the community. Content that the majority agrees with rises. Content that the majority disagrees with gets buried, sometimes below the default threshold, so you literally cannot see it unless you manually expand the thread. In a politically homogeneous community, this means that the minority views effectively do not exist. They're not banned, they're just made invisible. Now layer on the karma system. Your karma score is the accumulation of all your upvotes across the platform. It functions as social currency. It feels good when it goes up, and it feels bad when it goes down. So over time, this creates a powerful, invincible incentive. Post what you know the community will agree with, and you'll be rewarded. Post something that challenges the consensus, and you will be punished. And then there's the volunteer moderators, which is probably the most important factor in how Reddit became what it is. Reddit's moderation is overwhelmingly performed not by employees, but by unpaid volunteers. At any given time, a relatively small number of what's called power mods, individual users who moderate dozens or even hundreds of subreddits simultaneously, control a massive portion of the platform's content. Before Reddit introduced caps on this practice, some single users moderated over 200 different subreddits. A handful of people accountable to nobody with total control over what millions of users could and could not say across a huge swath of the platform. These moderators do not represent the average Reddit user. They are the people passionate enough about moderating that they volunteer to do it for free, at scale. And the people passionate enough to moderate at that scale tend to have strong, consistent political commitments. The University of Michigan's Ross School of Business published a study in 2024 analyzing more than 600 million Reddit comments. The findings were unambiguous. Moderators removed comments whose political orientation was opposite to their own significantly more than comments aligned with their views. The research concluded plainly that the bias in moderation creates echo chambers. Now add demographics. A consistent Pew Research survey trend shows that Reddit news consumers skew approximately 47% liberal versus 13% conservative. The platform self-selects for young, urban, educated, left-leaning users, particularly in the United States. As the platform grew, this demographic tilt became self-reinforcing. Conservative users felt less welcome. Many left. Those who stayed learned to moderate their language to survive. The communities were more homogeneous. The moderation became more aggressive against the remaining dissent, and the cycle continued. The result, by the mid-2020s, is a platform where independent content analysis of major subreddits found that approximately 99.1% of top posters in political communities favored left-leaning perspectives, and the contrast with other platforms is stark. After Elon Musk bought Twitter and rebranded it to X in 2022, that platform went in precisely the opposite direction. It reduced moderation. It reinstalled banned accounts. Now, you can agree or disagree with those choices. The point is that Reddit and X have now landed at essentially opposite poles of the content moderation and free speech spectrum. One is a largely unrestricted free-for-all. The other is a tightly controlled environment where the consensus is enforced not by an algorithm, but by thousands of volunteer ideological enforcers at scale every day. In January of 2025, over 100 Reddit communities banned users from posting links from X entirely. Moderators in communities like r/technology and r/world news began automatically removing any link that pointed to X. The stated justification was fighting misinformation, but leaked moderator chat logs showed that many of the people making these decisions openly described Elon Musk as a fascist and acknowledged the ban was ideological rather than practical. Reddit's official policy technically prohibits this kind of selective blocking, but it enforced nothing. The ban stood. And in February 2025, a subreddit called r/White People Twitter, a community with millions of members, was temporarily suspended for 72 hours after posts appeared calling for physical violence against employees of the Department of Government Efficiency, including comments like "time to hunt" and direct calls for people to be shot. Elon Musk, whose companies were being targeted by those posts, flagged them on X. Reddit suspended the community. 2 days later, they brought it back. The community had millions of members and was considered a mainstream Reddit space. It had hosted explicit calls for violence, but the suspension lasted only 72 hours. Compare that to r/The Donald, a subreddit with around 800,000 members at its peak, which Reddit quarantined in 2019 and ultimately banned in 2020 after a handful of posts that included inflammatory rhetoric. The community was gone, permanently, And the contrast tells you everything you need to know about how rules are applied, depending on which direction the mob is pointing. While all of this was playing out culturally, Reddit was quietly becoming one of the most valuable companies in the tech industry, and the way it got there tells its own story. For most of its early existence, Reddit was not a particularly profitable business. It burned through money. It was more of a cultural institution than a functioning company. That began to change around 2021 and accelerated dramatically over the following 4 years. In 2021, Reddit generated $485 million in revenue. In 2022, $667 million. 2023, $804 million. 2024, $1.3 billion. And in 2025, $2.2 billion, a 69% year-over-year increase. The fourth quarter of 2025 alone generated $726 million in revenue. These are extraordinary numbers for a platform that does not charge its users a dime to participate, and the majority of that revenue comes from advertising, as it does on most platforms. But the number that really explains Reddit's sudden explosive growth is a different one. In February of 2024, Reddit announced a deal with Google worth approximately $60 million per year to license its real-time user content for training Google's AI models. Around the time, Reddit struck a separate deal with OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, to license its data for similar purposes. Reddit also deals with several other AI companies under similar arrangements.
Artificial intelligence is actual intelligence, and that's what you find on Reddit.
This AI data licensing became, almost overnight, one of the most significant growth drivers in the company's history. So for 20 years, Reddit's unpaid volunteer users have been generating billions of posts and comments, real human language, and real human conversations on essentially every topic imaginable. And that data is extraordinarily valuable for training large language models. The users who generated it received nothing. The moderators who managed it received nothing. Reddit, which provided the platform and retained the data, received the money. It sold its users words for tens of millions of dollars per year and cut none of them in on it. Reddit went public on the New York Stock Exchange in March of 2024 under the ticker symbol RDDT. It IPO'd at roughly $34 per share. By 2025, the stock had peaked somewhere in the range of $270 to $280 per share, an extraordinary run. By March of 2026, it had pulled back to around $132 per share, still representing an enormous return from its IPO price, even amid broader market volatility. The company announced a $1 billion share buyback program. Steve Huffman, the CEO, who once secretly edited users' posts to protest his own ego, was compensated approximately $193 million in 2024. In a year where Reddit's stock ran up dramatically on the back of an IPO in AI data deals, the man who runs the platform was paid $193 million. His platform's moderation is largely performed by unpaid volunteers. His platform's content is created entirely by unpaid users. He was paid $193 million. And there was a moment in 2023 that briefly threatened all of this. Reddit announced it would dramatically increase the prices it charged developers to access its API, its application programming interface, meaning the technical gateway that third-party apps use to connect to Reddit's data. This was explicitly designed to kill those third-party apps before the IPO because Reddit wanted to control its own ecosystem and capture the value of its data rather than let it flow to outside developers. Several popular third-party Reddit clients, Apollo, Reddit is Fun, announced they would be forced to shut down as a result. And the response from Reddit's users was the largest coordinated protest in the platform's history. More than 8,000 subreddits went dark, making themselves private and inaccessible in a mass blackout. It was a genuine show of force, and for a few days, huge portions of Reddit was simply not working. Huffman's response was to tell a journalist that the protesters were not the intended audience for the changes, and that the protesters' decision to go dark would not impact the company's plans. He compared moderators who opposed him to a landlord who couldn't be removed and replaced. The protest lasted about 2 weeks. Reddit didn't budge. The third-party apps shut down. The IPO proceeded, and the stock ran up, and the moderators who had organized the largest protest in Reddit's history went back to moderating for free. It was one of the clearest demonstrations of the power dynamic that defines Reddit in 2025, a community that believes it runs the platform, overseen by a corporation that knows it does. Now, the most disturbing thing about Reddit is not its politics, it's what its structure does to individual human beings. Snark subreddits are communities built around sustained, organized mockery of a specific person or group. They operate operate under a veneer of accountability, the idea that they exist to hold public figures to account, to call out bad behavior, to provide a place for critical discussion. But in practice, there's something closer to organized harassment infrastructure. The largest and most established ones target celebrities, influencers, and reality TV personalities. r/Faux-moi and r/Dom-moi, snark communities dedicated to individual small creators, YouTubers, streamers, animal rescuers, operate at a very different scale of power asymmetry. A celebrity with a team of PR professionals and millions of followers has some structural protection against a Reddit community mocking them. A 30-year-old woman in rural Minnesota who runs a fox sanctuary does not. Michaela Raines was not powerful. She was a person who loved animals and shared that love on the internet. The subreddit built to target her, Save a Fox Snark, was not large. According to Reddit's own statement, it had only 28 active members at the time of her death. But for someone with autism and borderline personality disorder who felt every word directed towards her, 28 people coordinating to spread false claims about animal abuse and post mocking content about her appearance and mental health was enough. Her husband Ethan described performing CPR on her for 15 minutes before paramedics arrived. He said in his video,
"If you only have negative garbage to say, just shut up."
After her death, when the petition reached 23,000 signatures and mainstream news coverage forced Reddit to engage, the platform banned the subreddit. After, when it didn't matter anymore, the snark subreddit had existed for over a year. Reddit had not touched it. Only public pressure after a death generated a response. The Boston Marathon case from 2013 is different in character, but similar in mechanism. Thousands of users, thinking they're the good guys in the sense that they believe they were helping, built a social consensus around a completely wrong answer. The guy had already died, but his family wasn't, and the Reddit mob found them. The platform apologized, but it did not meaningfully change the architecture that made that possible. If happening in 2014, where stolen nude photographs of dozens of celebrities were distributed across Reddit communities, was not a fringe event hosted in some dark corner of the internet. It was front page Reddit for days. It demonstrated that the platform's commitment to free speech was, in practice, often a commitment to enabling the exploitation of women's bodies without their consent. These are not isolated failures. It's a pattern, and the pattern points to a structural reality. Reddit's design creates conditions where mobs easily form, where anonymity removes accountability, where the upvote system rewards engagement regardless of whether that engagement is constructive or cruel, and where volunteer moderators with no professional training or oversight are the only thing standing between a community and its worst impulses. And often, those moderators themselves are the worst impulse. There is an academic literature building around this. Research has been consistently documenting what platform researchers called brigading, a coordinated invasion of a space by users from another community to mass downvote, harass, or overwhelm dissenting voices. Reddit's structure makes brigading easy. You post a link in one community, pointing to the content in another community, and your members flood it. Reddit has rules against this, but its enforcement is inconsistent at best. Reddit likes to present itself as a global community. The reality is somewhat more complicated. As of late 2025, roughly 52% of Reddit's traffic originates in the United States, with Canada around 7%, the United Kingdom at nearly 7%, Australia at about 4%, and Germany at 3%. It is a predominantly English language, predominantly American platform with American political dynamics dominating its most popular communities, which means that a platform with 121 daily active users is pushing a very specific political worldview at a very large slice of the global internet using platform. Internationally, Reddit has a complicated relationship with governments. It is currently blocked entirely in China, North Korea, and partially blocked in several other countries. In Russia, it was blocked in 2015 over drug-related content and then unblocked. Indonesia blocked it for years due to adult content. In July of 2025, Reddit introduced age verification requirements in some regions in response to increasing regulatory pressure, particularly from European governments. That European pressure is itself a significant and underreported story. In 2025, the U.S. House Judiciary Committee published a detailed report documenting how the European Union's Digital Services Act, which regulates online speech across the bloc, had been used to pressure American social media platforms to change their global content moderation policies. The Commission's efforts, according to the internal documents subpoenaed from major tech companies, were explicitly aimed at suppressing political speech that had threatened established political consensus on issues like immigration. Reddit, along with other major platforms, had adjusted adjusted its moderation in response to European pressure, meaning that a European regulatory body was shaping what an American platform allowed its American users to say. In February of 2019, Chinese company Tencent invested $150 million into Reddit. The investment was technically a minority stake and came with no editorial control, but it generated a significant backlash on the platform itself. Users flooded Reddit with posts about Tiananmen Square, Tank Man, and other topics censored in China, essentially stress testing whether the investment had changed anything. It appeared it hadn't, but the question of what compromises come attached to taking money from a company with close ties to the Chinese Communist Party has never fully gone away. The GameStop situation in January of 2021 is one of the most dramatic demonstrations of what Reddit can do when its collective power is pointed in a specific direction. The subreddit r/Wall Street Bets, with millions of members, organized a coordinated campaign to buy shares in struggling video game retailer GameStop, specifically because large institutional hedge funds had shorted the stock, meaning they had bet billions of dollars that the stock price would fall. The Reddit users decided to make those bets fail by driving the price up through collective buying. And it worked. GameStop's stock went from roughly $20 a share to nearly $500 in a matter of days. Several major hedge funds lost billions of dollars. Retail investors, ordinary people on Reddit made fortunes, at least temporarily. The financial establishment was blindsided. Congressional hearings were held. It was one of the most entertaining financial stories of the decade, but it also demonstrated something important. Reddit is capable of coordinated collective action at massive scale. That power is extraordinary when it is pointed at an exploitative financial institution. It is terrifying when it's pointed at a person. The r/Place experiment is another window into how Reddit's political wars play out in real time. Every few years, Reddit opens a giant shared canvas where any user can place a single colored pixel every few minutes, collaborating with others to create images. The result is a chaotic, fascinating, and deeply revealing snapshot of what Reddit's communities care about and how they fight for territory. Over multiple iterations, the most revealing battles on r/Place have been explicitly political, organized campaigns by communities to draw and defend competing imagery, with political factions fighting pixel by pixel. It is politics as performance art. It is also a perfect model for how Reddit's political dynamics work everywhere else. Organized communities competing for dominance, with the most cohesive and motivated groups winning. Reddit's financial position in early 2026 is strong. Revenue is growing at nearly 70% year over year. Daily active users have crossed 121 million and show no sign of slowing. The AI data licensing deals with Google and OpenAI represent a revenue stream with essentially no marginal cost. Reddit collects the money without spending anything to generate the content being licensed. The company has announced a $1 billion share buyback, signaling confidence in its financial trajectory. By every traditional business metric, Reddit is succeeding. The cultural trajectory is harder to assess. Reddit's dominance of certain online niches, technical question answering, niche hobbies, local community organizing, is essentially unchallenged. When you search for honest reviews of a product or a genuine answer to a specific question, Reddit results are frequently the most useful thing you can find. The platform has real value in a large number of specific contexts, and that value is not going away. But the trust problems are real and structural. Alternative platforms have repeatedly attempted to fill the space that Reddit leaves for users who feel unwelcome. Vote, the most prominent alternative, was founded specifically to serve as a free speech Reddit competitor. It attracted an enormous amount of the worst content imaginable, including communities that have been banned from Reddit for genuine hate speech, and eventually collapsed under its own toxicity in 2020. Lemmy, a decentralized alternative built on open source software, gained traction after the 2023 API protests, but remains a niche product with a fraction of Reddit's scale. The pattern suggests that Reddit's position is structurally durable. The alternatives that try to be freer tend to attract the worst users and implode, while the alternatives that try to be more restrained do not offer enough difference to peel away the mainstream. The more serious threats to Reddit come from two directions simultaneously. The first is regulatory. Section 230, the law that provides social media platforms broad immunity from liability for user-generated content, is increasingly under scrutiny from both political parties, for different reasons. If Congress modifies Section 230 to hold platforms liable for harassment campaigns or political discrimination, Reddit's moderation practices and its tolerance to snark communities become legal liabilities rather than policy choices. Lawsuits from families of harassment victims, people like Michaela Rains, are a real possibility. The second threat is user fatigue. Reddit's political environment is genuinely exhausting for anyone who does not already agree with the prevailing consensus. The relentless downvoting of dissent, the permanent banning of large right-leaning communities, the subreddits that block X links out of ideological solidarity rather than practical necessity, all of this creates a platform that a substantial portion of the population finds hostile. As competing platforms develop, as X stabilizes, as newer communities find their footing, the question is whether Reddit's ideological monoculture drives away enough users to matter financially. So far the answer is no, and whether that remains true over the next decade is genuinely uncertain. The AI question may be the most significant of all. Reddit's value as an AI training data source is enormous right now because it represents 2 decades of authentic, unfiltered human conversation at scale. But AI systems that are trained on Reddit's data are inheriting Reddit's biases. The same 112-to-1 ratio of left-leaning to right-leaning content, the same structure that amplified consensus and buried dissent. The AI systems of the future are being shaped in part by the echo chambers of the present. That is a feedback loop with consequences that nobody has fully mapped out yet. And then there is the question of what Reddit's existence does to the broader information environment. Reddit is not just a platform where people go to talk. It is a platform that Google, the dominant search engine on the planet, treats as a highly authoritative source. When you search for a medical question, a product review, a news event, Reddit results appear near the top of your search results. Reddit's content shapes what information millions of people find when they go looking for answers. A platform with a 99.1% left-leaning political tilt on its major political subreddits is not just an echo chamber. It is an input into the information infrastructure that everyone relies on. There are paths forward that Reddit's leadership could choose. They could introduce meaningful structural reforms, capping moderator power more aggressively, building genuine independent oversight into the moderation process, creating mechanisms for diverse political viewpoints to survive in major communities. Some researchers have argued for algorithmic changes that would prevent the most extreme forms of vote manipulation and brigading. Others have called for Reddit to pay its moderators, which would, at minimum, create accountability as a professional standard for moderation decisions. The company has made small moves in some of these directions. It has not made the fundamental reforms that would change the underlying architecture. And the reason is obvious. The current architecture works. Financially, the echo chambers generate engagement. The outrage generates upvotes. The controversy generates traffic. The traffic generates advertising revenue. The advertising revenue funds the platform. The data from all of it gets sold to AI companies for tens of millions of dollars per year. Changing the architecture would mean disrupting the engagement mechanics that make all of this work. And Reddit's leadership has shown repeatedly that when the choice comes down to ethics versus growth, they choose growth. That was true when they left r/jailbait running for years until national TV coverage forced their hand. It was true when they let the Boston Marathon mob run free. It was true when they hosted the Fappening for days before pulling it down. It was true when Huffman secretly edited users' comments and laughed it off. It was true when they dismissed the largest moderated protest in the platform's history as irrelevant to their plans. And it was true when a 30-year-old woman who rescued foxes for a living died. And Reddit's first response to 23,000 people demanding accountability was to note that the subreddit harassing her had only 28 members. Reddit will tell you it's a community. Its CEO will tell you it's a platform built on user empowerment and collective intelligence. Its filings will tell you it's a profitable and growing business. All three of these things are true, but none of them are the whole truth. The whole truth is a platform that built a machine for generating consensus and refusing to take responsibility for what that machine produces. A platform that protected the ideological enforcers who made it hostile to half the political spectrum. A platform that sold its users words for hundreds of millions of dollars without giving those users assent. A platform that hosts harassment of many creators online and bans those communities when it goes against the creators that support the political opinions of the platform. They call that the front page of the internet. And in a way, it has never been more accurate, because the internet in 2026 is not what it promised to be in 2005. It promised the democratization of speech. What it delivered, in Reddit's case, is a platform where a small group of volunteer enforcers decides what the democracy is allowed to say. A corporation that profits from the conflict, and real people who pay real prices for what happens when the machine points in their direction. The story of Reddit is still being written, and unfortunately, a few more content creators may die along the way.